What's going on, Packers Nation? A happy Saturday. We are one day away from game day against the Chicago Bears. Welcome back to another episode of Packers Latest. I am your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date with everything you need to know on the green and gold Green Bay Packers. Once more, just one day away from kickoff against the Chicago Bears. America's game on the week. You can watch it on Fox. Very exciting times. I have been waiting for a Packers-Bears matchup. The Packers having such a heavy load of NFC North play towards the back end of the season, which honestly makes these games feel like they're more and more important. Every division game is important in their own way, but the fact that it is in the home stretch of the regular season, and you see how the NFC seeding lays out, this is a big one. And it's one at home. You got the home field advantage, and you want to make the Green Bay crowd happy. But once again, I am your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date on everything you need to know on the green and gold. And we're going to start off with another defensive tackle addition for Green Bay. We've seen two additions now in that department after Devontae Wyatt was announced out for the season with that ankle injury. This one, the Green Bay Packers, they claimed Quinton Bohanna off the waivers. And I got a couple of things on Bohanna here. All of these are per Zach Kruse of Packers Wire. Wrote a pretty solid article kind of breaking down who Bohanna is, how the Packers are going to manage him. So definitely make sure to check that out in addition to what I'm going to read from there. So Bohanna is a 6th round pick out of Dallas in 2023, and he was waived by the Seahawks on December 4th. He played in 5 games for the Seahawks this season, seeing action on 32 defensive snaps. Bohanna stands at 6'4" and 335 pounds, and he will have to pass a physical with the Packers before he is officially added to the 53-man roster. Again, this is new as of Friday, so he does have to pass that physical if he wants to join Green Bay on Sunday. If he does, he will join a group of young defensive tackles behind expected starters Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden. And looking at these defensive tackles that he will likely join if he is on that 53-man roster, it is Warren Brinson, who will be the primary backup behind Brooks, and which is Wyatt's old position, while Wooden, Riley, who they added the other day, and now Bohanna and Stackhouse will all take nose tackle snaps. So now it's kind of a thin defensive tackle room to a crowded defensive tackle room, but you really want that depth, especially with arguably your best defensive tackle in Devontae Wyatt being out for the season. So who knows, he still has to make the 53-man roster, but a spot is open there. But if a guy like Jaden Reed comes back, I believe he claims that spot. So it's just going to be a lot of mix-up, but nonetheless, another addition for Green Bay. It's nice to see that they're just trying to claim someone. They're not seeing that injury and just let it sit there and swallow them up. Despite having some depth already, they want to keep adding to that. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if he's even on the field on Sunday, but still need to see Green Bay attacking the waivers and adding a veteran like Bohanna. I guess I call him a veteran. I should say a guy with NFL experience, still rather young. But we talked about, there's a position open on that roster because of injuries. We are going to get into the final injury reports for both the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Going to start off with the Packers. There are officially 5 players ruled out for this one. I will say one of them is Devontae Wyatt, who was moved to IR. So if you're counting outside of him, 4 players officially ruled out. Starting off with running back Marshawn Lloyd. We saw he came back to practice this week after not practicing since week 2 of the preseason. There was some optimism that he was going to be able to come back, especially with some of those locker room interviews. But unfortunately, he will be a scratch in this one, still battling that calf injury. You go to the wide receiver room, Savion Williams is out with that foot injury. He was a guy that, seemed like maybe he'd be leading questionable, but he is officially out for this. And then 3 defensive linemen, one of them being Devontae Wyatt, and joining him, Lucas Van Ness battling that foot injury, and Colin Oliver with that hamstring injury. So this is why, to the point of Bohanna, why they are adding all these names. The defensive line keeps getting hurt, and you need to keep adding pieces. Really hoping that they can get healthy sometime soon, because, man, this is one of the most beat-up defensive lines in the NFL. You go to the questionables, and there's a handful of those. 2 in the wide receiver department in Jaden Reed, who I touched on a couple minutes ago, who could take that 53rd spot on the roster. And you also have Matthew Golden, who've been waiting for him to come back. Felt like maybe he'd be out just a week or 2, and now it's starting to extend a little bit past that, and he will be questionable for Green Bay on Sunday. Go to the defensive backs. Nate Hobbs, a guy that's been out the last 5 weeks, but trending in the right direction. Would be huge to have him back. The corner room is thin and has been thin with Hobbs' absence. You go to another defensive lineman, but luckily in the questionable department, Brenton Cox Jr., and then you go to safety Javon Bullard, who we talked about in the other episode. He is questionable as well. So definitely something to monitor. Make sure to check those updates, especially on Sunday, to see who will officially be on the field for Green Bay. But man, this is a slew of names, to say the least. And, the questionables, usually questionables lean towards playing, but when you see a guy like Matthew Golden, who's been questionable the last 2 to 3 weeks, that in my head kind of leans towards out, and I'm really hoping I'm wrong about that, but definitely some big blows for Green Bay. But hey, the Bears are dealing with the same. Focusing just on the Bears, who is listed out for this game, some pretty big names for them. Starting off on the offensive side, wide receiver Rome Odunze is ruled out with that foot injury. We talked about it in the last episode. He leads the Bears in nearly every receiving category. So statistically, their best receiver. I think, depth chart wise, maybe they're leaning more in the DJ Moore direction. So it'll be a big game for DJ Moore, especially with Odunze's absence. You go to the linebacker, Ruben Hippolyte II. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, so he will be out. And then defensive back Tyreek Stevenson with a hip injury. He will be out as well. So 2 teams that are very beaten up, but 2 teams that have very great depth and that have played well with their depth, for the reason why the Bears are 9-3 and the Packers are 8-3-1. So lots to monitor there. I knew I threw a lot of names out at you, but hey, there are a lot of names on those injury reports, which is very unfortunate to see for both sides. But, with the injury news, we got to find what are the keys to success. Even if the Packers are beat up, even if they're facing a Bears team that's beat up, what are the keys to success for Green Bay to come away with a win against Chicago to move on to 9-3-1? In my notes here, I have this in all caps, underlined and bolded. No turnovers. I know it sounds obvious, but just getting into these numbers for Green Bay in games and based on their turnovers, I know it'll seem a little obvious. You have more turnovers, you're probably going to lose. You have no turnovers, you're probably going to win. But they have 7 games this season with 0 turnovers, and they are a perfect 7-0 in those games. So if you just take that trend, if the Packers have no turnovers, they'll beat the Bears. Who knows if it'll be like that? But based on how the season has gone, if the Packers keep the football, they hold on to it, don't give it away, they are a perfect 7-0. They've had 3 games with 1 turnover, and they are 1-1-1 in those games. Funny enough, those games came in Week 3, Week 4, and Week 5. The loss to the Browns in Week 3, the tie against the Cowboys in Week 4, and the win against the Bengals in Week 5. So, if the Packers have 1 turnover, one of those ones are going to have to change, but definitely already sloping down to a 500 record compared to a 1,000 record with games with no turnovers. They've had 2 games this season with multiple turnovers, which were 2 in each of those games, and they are 0-2 in those, which were against the Carolina Panthers and the Philadelphia Eagles, both games that were at home. Both games where the Packers struggled to score, just 13 points in the loss to Carolina and just 7 in the loss to Philadelphia. A game where the defense played well in both of them, giving up just 16 to Carolina and 10 to Philadelphia, but the offense and the turnovers were the killer and the reason why the Packers went 0-2 in that stretch. So you got to keep, you got to hold on to the football. Again, sounds obvious, but when you really get in the numbers for Green Bay, it shows the importance in games where they don't turn it over. Be smart, play safe. You're playing a division opponent who has every inch of film on you, but you want to be Matt LaFleur. You want to get a little creative like we saw against Detroit in that win on Thanksgiving. Maybe kind of fluster that defense, but do it safely and hold on to that football. The second biggest point I have is make Chicago pass. The Chicago running attack is very dangerous, so if the Packers can plug that up and make them throw the ball, that could be definitely a key to success. The Chicago Bears, I've read these stats in a couple of other videos, but just as a refresher, they average 153.8 rushing yards per game, which is second in the NFL and first in the NFC. The only team above them is the Buffalo Bills, I believe, at 155 and some change. And with Chicago, they run truly a split backfield between DeAndre Swift and rookie out of Rutgers, Kyle Monangai. Swift has 160 carries on the season for 774 yards and 5 touchdowns. Monangai, 121 carries for 591 yards and also 5 touchdowns. And you even throw in Caleb Williams, their quarterback, into that mix. He's a mobile quarterback. he has contributed a lot on the ground game as well. 61 carries, 306 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So among Williams and the two backs that split the backfield the most between Swift and Monangai, you have 13 total touchdowns between those three on the ground. Chicago has played 12 games this season, so about a touchdown per game from that ground unit, and it is definitely dangerous. You look at the amount of yards per carry as well. Pretty good, a little bit over 4. I think maybe some of them, if I do the math, in my head really quick, which would be impressive, but it's about 4 to 5 yards per carry. Pretty solid numbers for this backfield and Caleb Williams as a whole. But we talk about it. One main reason why we want them to pass is because of how dangerous this run game is, but also Chicago and Caleb Williams struggling when throwing the football. Caleb Williams holds just a 58.1 completion percentage on the season, and his passer rating is 88.2, which is 22nd in the NFL, and his QBR of 54.9 is 18th. So definitely on the lower end of the passing numbers. But Caleb Williams, a young quarterback, only his second season in the league. You're not going to expect an MVP out of him this early, especially with a Chicago team that really struggled last season, that Caleb Williams and crew have brought up to 9-3 and the number one overall seed in the NFC. It's very impressive stuff that he's doing, so I don't mean to knock him with these numbers, but it's just the reality when you have a strong ground attack and your passing is a little bit weaker. That's something that you want to attribute if you're Jeff Hafley and the Packers defense. But one thing about Caleb Williams is even though he struggles, especially with completion percentage, he really does not turn the football over that much. 17 passing touchdowns to just 5 interceptions on the season. So Caleb Williams, very good at protecting that football. Jordan Love, also a quarterback good at protecting it with 19 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. It's a battle of two, NFC North rival quarterbacks, I should say, who are 1-1 against each other. So, very fresh rivalry. It's no more Aaron Rodgers and Jay Cutler or something like that. This is truly the start of a new era. Two young teams, two great teams record-wise, and two quarterbacks that have faced each other 2 times, each earning a win. One on a blocked field goal to win for Green Bay, and one on a made field goal to win for Chicago. So both games being by just 1 score. But with that, looking at the past 2 games, looking at the rivalry history as a whole, we got to get into some predictions for this game on Sunday. Not going to give a final score. What I really like to do with predictions, pick a touchdown score for the Packers and pick who I think the player of the game is going to be. For my touchdown scorer for Green Bay, I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs. He did not have one against Detroit, but he is usually a touchdown machine. Had that long streak this season of getting a touchdown every single game. Like I said, unfortunately did not get one against Detroit because Jordan Love threw 4 touchdowns in that 31-24 victory. But I think Josh Jacobs is due for a touchdown in this one. With the player of the game, I turn it over to the defense. I think it's going to be Quay Walker. Quay Walker, like we talked about in the last episode, he will be playing Sunday against Chicago after missing the last 2 games. He's the captain on this Green Bay Packers defense. If he plays smart, doesn't do anything dumb on the field, plays the game the right way, makes the great plays, we've seen him do that against Chicago in his career already. He is a dominant force on that field, and even in missing those 2 games, he is nearly top 3 in every defensive category compared to anyone else on that Packers defense, usually sitting behind the names of Micah Parsons, Edgerrin Cooper, or Rashawn Gary. Quay Walker right up there in that mix despite missing 2 games. But that's all I got for this episode of Packers Latest. Once more, my touchdown scorer, Josh Jacobs. My player of the game prediction, Quay Walker. Feel free, if you're a Packers fan, if you're a Bears fan, whoever's watching this game, feel free to leave your predictions down below if you want to throw a score prediction in there as well. Would love to read some of those, see how you think this game is going to shake out. It's going to be a cold one. We talked about the weather in the last episode. It is going to be, feels like, of negative temperatures by, kind of second half of that game, I think, as low as feels like of -4. So if you're going, bundle up, be safe, stay warm, and as always, go Pack Go. I'll see you guys Monday.